Hello, hello, hello. I am here to do a walkthrough of Stephen Bright's Inner Eye Oracle. I am a fan of Stephen Bright, so I will just say that. No, or release your biases. Again, I just think that there's some people that, you spend a lot of years kind of watching them and watching what they're doing and just seeing a consistency and seeing, their love for divination and things like that, just kind of progressing and just consistently across long periods of time. And that's how I feel about Steven. I do feel like we've been around together forever. Like, I just feel like I've seen him for so long, and he's just one of those people that you feel like is, again, just a nice, I think I said this about Jillian Wild. I've definitely said this about a couple people, where you just have that sense that they're just good people, just like good solid people, with a love for other people and a love for divination, and Stephen definitely goes into that category for me. I also of course, was excited to see that it was a Cardamancy style of a deck that was coming out. It says on the back, it says a reimagined classic. Much has been written about reading with playing cards, and many systems have been shared, but these methods have not always been easy to learn or remember. This 52 card deck changes that with a set of fully illustrated cards that show recognizable symbols with keywords that allow the diviner to read them right out of the box. The cards have been designed to provide the reader with a comprehensive oracle system for our modern age. While the illustrations have an antique and mystical feel to them, the subjects covered by the 52 cards are relatable to our daily lives and will stand the test of time. So if you know me at all, you know that I love what I call cardamancy style decks. All oracle and tarot decks, excuse me, are cardamancy. So this is just my own thing, but I kind of set cardamancy aside to decks that are more closely related to their grandmother, the playing card deck, that are more closely aligned with symbolic reading, that like we see with Lenormand and Kipper and Sibylla and these types of decks. Although this to me feels maybe a little bit closer to Lenormand style, which is certainly my favorite. So that's what, so I'm always excited to see something like this come up, because I think it is such a rich way of reading. And it's certainly not something that I want to see sort of shuffling off to the sides. I did not mean the shuffling in that way, but anyways, so I'm always excited to see these. I love the backs here. I actually love this matte red. I was really surprised when I especially look at that. I mean, that just looks amazing. Again, Stephen has just he's interesting because he's got an interesting modern flair to him and to things that he does. But at the same time, they feel timeless, and they do feel like they're touching, like that is just, that's the kind of back that just makes you want to set up a table and sit down and do some readings for people at the street corner or in the bar or something, right? Absolutely love it. So that's what that's the side. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the beautiful matte sides, and I love this back. Box. So this is Red Feather. Is Red Feathered? I want to say it wrong. I feel like Red Feather is a Schiffer subsidiary, but I guess that may be completely, yeah, an imprint of Schiffer Publishing. I thought they were part of Schiffer. So here we have a guidebook. Obviously, I've taken a peek at it because I wanted to see sort of what he was doing here with the style of deck. Whether this was a playing card, it was really focused on the playing card. I will say that I think they named this very well. It's the Inner Eye Oracle. And for me, it definitely straddles that beautiful space between playing card divination and oracle, again, like we saw in many decks coming out in the 1800s, where some of them utilized the connection between the playing cards, and some of them, the playing cards was more of a vehicle for the oracle. And this kind of feels like it pushes more towards that, only because there is one space in here, and I don't know if I actually... we have the suits, and there definitely plays along with the suits, but he does write in the guidebook, each pip has a number and suit icons. The numbers have no direct meanings, but act as a means for identifying each card. So this isn't really trying to say, take the Western cardamancy feel for the ace of clubs and then utilize that and kind of make an image that matches that. So it's more that, again, there's a tradition of playing cards being used as a vehicle for this type of oracle. And so I love that that's just very clearly set out and defined there. But I mean, you will see some correlation, like new beginnings for aces, right? That certainly makes sense. Money would be maybe new spark of money here with the ace. But my point is that we have those indices here as sort of a reference, so that you know what the card is there, and kind of more as a organizational system than as a cardamancy. But I think that's important to be aware of, because if you're trying to say, okay, well, and then this one works. We have the 10 of clubs. Clubs for me are about, or the suit of clubs is about interactions and how we interact with the outer world. And so to have the culmination of the suit of clubs be a social engagement, so that one actually, that makes sense. So so I think that, sometimes that slips in. Obviously, Stephen has been working with tarot, reading tarot, writing about tarot for a very long time. And so, numbers, I think, are going to be a little bit of second nature to him. And so my guess is that can slide in. Even like with the 9 of spades being the worries, that certainly ties in with the Rider-Waite-Smith 9 of swords. So I think you'll see a little bit of overlap, but I do think that it's important that the guidebook noted that that's not the numbers aren't a deliberate connection to that, and are just like an organization method, so that you're not trying to make a connection there that's just not there. So you really want to focus on it as a symbol based deck, which is great. I don't use, when I read Lenormand, I don't use the playing card associations to Lenormand. I'm just using the symbols, and so that works perfectly fine for symbol-based system. So that's the one thing that I did want to note there. And again, I think the inner eye oracle is a great way to put that. Now, what the other part that I tabbed here is that Stephen also noted that this fortune telling deck has its own system built into the pack. It is designed for 2 and 3 card readings, and so and he really does a great job in going in and describing this, and I'll talk about it in a minute. Although I don't want to, when you're doing a review, obviously it's kind of hard, like you don't want to go in and give away somebody's whole like system of reading when you need to go buy the deck and see the whole thing. So I want to be able to touch on it because it is an important part of it. There is a very specific system in play here, especially in what I like about this is as you can see with the, here's the reading space, here's you in relation to the cards, here's you in relation to the cards, here's you in relation to the cards. So it really seems to be, for me, a system. It's a symbolic system, super easy to pick up. If you're comfortable reading cardamancy style decks, it's going to be really easy for you to step into that space with this, which is great. But at the same time, what I think it does different is this orienting of the reader or the querent. I guess the best way to put that would be the querent, whether it's you or the person that you're reading with. It's really about orienting where are you at in this reading, and then getting your information based off of that. I think that's really cool. And so we will talk a little bit about that, again, without trying to like give away the whole, like, you need to go buy the book if it interests you, or the deck if it interests you. So I don't want to go through it in great detail, but the key is that in this style of reading that he really goes into detail about, you're really focusing on orienting yourself or the person you're reading for, and then seeing what information that you get about where you show up in that reading, whether you're over here as sort of the unknown and the cards in here, or you're within the cards. It's really cool. So I think that that's what this to me really brings to the table. That's different than other kind of cardamancy things that we might see. Okay, so enough of that. You've seen the back here. Absolutely love this back. There's nothing I would change about that. I think it is awesome. And then in the front, again, we've got the playing card indices. The suits do come into some play. We'll talk about that in a second. Again, remember the numbers really aren't, again, you'll see some overlap, but that's the intention, wasn't necessarily for the numbers to play any role. You've got the image that's in the middle that stands out nice and bold. And then you've got the title of it right on the side, much like with a Lenormand deck. So you don't really have to think all that hard. What was he thinking when he put a boxing glove on there, right? Is it fighting or is it connecting, right? Is this, at home obviously makes sense. We have the snail. There's some different ways you could approach a snail. He's using it for delays, and it's right there on the card. I love the family tree. I know we're going in through it, seeing it. But that's a really great way, again, to shortcut right into doing the readings that you need to do, that I love. So let's zoom in so we can go through these. So we'll talk about the quartz in a second when we get to the first set of quartz, but we have the PIP cards. One of the things to note is that there are no people in the PIP cards, which I really like, because it lets the quartz really stand out as the people in the situation. Or again, I don't always read the quartz strictly as people, but it lets the court stand out. So we don't have people in both the number cards and in the court cards, which I actually really like, that distinction. The guidebook is organized by alphabetical. Again, you can tell it is really highlighting your symbol here, versus the suits or versus the numbers. It's really highlighting the symbol that's here, and we have the core meaning of it here. Obviously, there's more. You don't, just because the Lenormand card house has a house on the word home or house on written on it, doesn't mean that we don't go into the different layers, but it gives us a nice little key into the main idea of the symbol, and then you can just energetically riff off of it from there. But it is alphabetized off of that versus in any other order. So that is something to pay attention to when you're going to find it. Just take your title card there and go find it, and it's easy to do so. But again, highlighting that the symbol stands as the key element here to pay attention to, which again, I like. We know what's the main focus here, and we're going to focus our attention there. So that's what we have there. So I'm going to read what we have on the first one. Well, I'll find the first one, the New Beginnings, just so you can see what you get. But what you get in general, well, now I'm going to search for it. You have a small image of the cards. You have sort of a description of what the image is and what we're looking at. We have a nice little write-up here, in-depth write-up, and then we have how could we utilize that card as a daily card, to give us, if we're pulling this as a card of the day, how would we interpret it that way? So let me go ahead and read this just so you can see one of the things. A small sapling starts its life in a big pot reaching up to the sky with its tiny leaves. New beginnings occur for us all. They can manifest as major life shifts, such as change of residence or career, or may show up as something less significant, such as a change of image, learning something new, or a new diet. Often it will take something to end before something new can start. In the case of a more healthy diet, illness or weight gain might have provoked a change. In some cases, fresh starts will be out of our control. We might be assigned a new tutor or need to relocate for work. These changes may not be as welcome as those we choose ourselves, but this card is naturally optimistic when it falls into a reading. You are encouraged to look for the positive gain you will receive from the new beginning indicated. Depending on what is ended and what is beginning, a new beginning can either be easy or challenging. It's always important to see which cards partner with this one. Whereas a new beginning with love, the Ace of Hearts, might feel exciting. With loss, the Five of Hearts, it could suggest moving on in grief or for the next chapter after a failed love affair. As a daily card, we might consider that every day is a new beginning. Should this card show up for you in a daily draw, it will ask that you embrace the new day with enthusiasm and gusto. It might make sense for you to leave yesterday behind, especially if it was testing or taxing, and wipe the slate clean. When new beginnings is drawn singly, it could be suggesting that you consciously make a fresh start. What new thing would you like to take on? Is there something you'd like to try? Does your lifestyle need a shakeup? So I really like that this daily card is here, because again, I do think he's really situating this as holding the best that, cardamancy and symbolic reading, in those small but in-depth readings that you can get out of it, but then also recognizing that we can just take this one card as a card of the day and kind of sit with that, and how would we interpret that if we were going to dive deeper into more of an oracle sense than a cardamancy sense of stringing. And so that gives you a way to use this in single card pulls as well. So that's a nice way. And it also, again, fills out how can we really, I feel like that's a lot of information on those single card, and then how to take that and use that. So we have that, obviously, that all the way through. We'll talk about the court cards when we get to the first set of courts, but that's what we have for each one of the cards, which again, I think is a fantastic amount. So here we have our new beginnings, our opportunity, really watching for an opportunity. We have change with kind of like the water wheel here. Change. We have planning. We have obstacles. Let me start to, let's see. Opportunity, change. I mean, change can be either or. Sorry, I'm going to start making my piles as I like to do. We have the ship card with travel. We do see some Lenormand symbols here, but I don't think there is, well, I know there's not a full set of Lenormand in here, but we certainly do see some of them, and they make sense. They would be in these types of decks. So we have travel, we have strength. Again, you might say, oh, well, why wouldn't that be on the 8? But just remember that this isn't really about these. This is just a organizing structure for it. So just pay attention to your symbols here. We have the strength with the lion. We have gift, which is a popular to show up on cardamancy style decks. Official things, I quite like that. That has a very Kipper vibe to it, sort of that stamp of official approval. Knowing when something is official, I think, is really helpful. We talked about the social engagements. And then we come to the courts. Now, in the guidebook, the courts have their own section, as again, I think this is quite an important part of his system. He does also talk about gender. While there are genders of people on the cards, he does make note that whatever gender is depicted on the card, don't get tied into that being a specific gender of person in a situation, right? It's just embodying the energy of the rebel, whether that's a male or a female. So he does definitely note that. So he does give you a little section about the jacks. They are the youngest member of the playing card court. His or her age is relevant to interpretation of each card, since it denotes attributes such as hope, expectation, and drive in the jacks. Again, it's important to remember that because of their youth, they will also regard immaturity, inexperience, and naivety to mature people. So again, you have a pretty good description of what we see and why this image is being put on here. And then you also have drawing this. And what I like to, as a daily card, and I also like that while a lot of times people associate people with the court cards, and I think there's definitely some of this in the system here, I don't use that a lot, and this really does kind of give you an understanding of how you would read this, whether this was a person or a description of the energy in a situation or something that is coming up within your own self. So I think that is useful. And then there are actually some keywords as well. So we again have the rebel, the description, the daily card, and then we have keywords: opposition, resistance, unconventional, inspirational, spontaneity, individuality. So we have some keywords about that energy, which I think is again useful, as a lot of times both in tarot and playing cards and anything where there are people cards, we do sometimes see where people aren't always sure what to do with those. And so having some good keywords that doesn't have to be a person. It could indicate the energy, could indicate what you're putting out there, or what somebody else is adding to the situation as well. I think that's really helpful if you're trying to get a handle on that. So I don't think we see the key. Let me just double check. But we don't see the keywords. Yeah, we don't see the keywords in the pips, just in the court cards. I also like the way of you having sort of personality types in the courts, as that should be, but I like that. So for example, here we have the rebel, here we have the leader in the Queen of Clubs, and here we have the authority figure in the King here. So we definitely see sort of that hierarchy. Courts are hierarchy, right? They are kind of going from youngest to oldest, from least power to most power. So, there's different ways in which people utilize those hierarchies, but they are hierarchical. And so I like, though, the personality types that there. I think there's a lot that you could do with that as well. So that's the court cards. We'll talk a little more about the court cards when we get to sort of the way that this deck is meant to be read, because courts do play a strong role in that. But let's go through the rest of the cards. Here we have the money card, stability, conflict, home. Again, this, common cards that we might see in fortune telling style decks, and they're common for a reason, because we utilize these in everyday reading. So I love that. I actually love there being a delay card. Love the tree as a family. That's how I love to see this. So that's a tree that we have in Lenormand, but this is about family. That's different, right? The symbol, and I quite like the tree as a family card there. Our family tree, obviously. Here we have work with the gears, support with the crutch, rest. I'm gonna assume, I guess I shouldn't assume. I don't know if this is a mix of things that he's sketched or graphics that are pulled. These do feel like some of these feel more like graphics. I think that these are graphics that are pre-existing graphics that are used, versus all of these being drawn. That seems to be the case when you're looking at the art. I think they actually work really well for and I could be wrong. I don't see anything directly about the copyright. Obviously Stephen, I know he's an artist, so I know he draws himself, but I kind of think this is more of a utilizing of different um, different design elements or graphic elements that you can get a hold of, but it could be a mix of both of those things. So I'll try to find out and maybe put a note in the description, but that's what it seems to me. It all seems to be very fortune telling deck, cardamancy style deck flavor to them, that have a bit of a vintage feel that I quite like. Here we have Rest. I like this, kind of like the short illness bed card in Kipper. We have Endings, which is important. Again, that's on a 10. You can, I feel like you can see sometimes some correlations to numbers and maybe to tarot cards, but then sometimes not. So again, I would not try to pull that in, because he said very clearly that that's not that. So then if you're going to get this, you're going to say, oh, but the 10 of Pentacles means this, or the 10 of Diamonds means this, and this doesn't mean this. He's very clearly said that that's not the intention. So just focus on the symbols there. But it's hard for me to, I'm just kind of been peeking at it, and you can kind of see where a little bit of numbers seep in. Excuse me. So we have Endings there. And then for this court, we have the Apprentice, which I quite like with the Jack of Diamonds. We have the Pragmatist with the Queen of Diamonds. And we have the Protector with the King of Diamonds. Here we have Love for the Ace of Hearts. We have Romance. We have Memories. That's pretty cool. We have Restriction, the Caged Bird. We have Loss. Again, Five of Cups, like you can certainly see, again, a little bit of correlation. We have Commitment with the Ring. I love the puzzle pieces for a relationship, energy that's in relationship. Passion with the Matchbook. Luck with a Horseshoe. Success with a medal. Again, I like that, kind of feels like a high honor. You definitely feel the sort of history of fortune telling style cards like Kipper, again, Kipper, Sibylla, Lenormand, those types of decks. And there were tons that came out in the 1800s. And you can certainly see a nod to those types of cards because they worked and they were useful in readings. So I really like seeing those energies here. For the Hearts court, we have the Lover, the Friend with the Queen of Hearts, and the Guide with the King of Hearts. Here we have Ideas, Decisions. Definitely not following sort of the typical spades are, you know, are challenging, whereas the hearts are all positive. This is definitely not following that, so don't get tripped up by that. Satisfaction, Mail, News, personal versus public. That's interesting. I like that. Solutions with the Key. Disingenuity, you know, sort of underhanded. There's things going on behind that mask. Communication with the, I love these little telephones. Worries, a little bunny. Stephen has 2 rabbits that have been wonderful to watch. But we have Worries here. He looks a little stressed. Misfortune. Again, the 10s do kind of feel like they go with their with their 10s, but here we have Misfortune. We have the Stranger. I love having a Stranger card. The Thinker for the Queen of Swords, or the Queen of Spades, and the Advisor for the King of Spades. So you do see, I just kind of pull a couple, like you do see some Lenormand symbols, but it's definitely not where, you know, you don't have a whole, it's not based around a Lenormand deck. It's just similar in style, which there were many cards that were, and I love, again, keeping of that tradition. Let me pull this out a little bit. Let's give these a shuffle. I haven't been able to shuffle them yet, obviously. They shuffle good. They're kind of a standard, you know, oracle deck. These are definitely not playing card stock. Obviously, these are larger than playing card. they are meant to, you know, just pull 3 cards, but it is a nice size if you're planning on just pulling 1 card. But as an oracle, obviously as a cardamancy deck, they are larger, but they're not so large. This isn't meant to put a whole tableau on the table. It's very clear in the instructions. This is meant to do like 2 and 3 card readings. So I think this is a great compromise in size so that you can pull 1 card, and it has some substance size wise, but it's not so obnoxious, which would look ridiculous, I think, with playing cards and have it like, you know, a full size oracle. So I actually think that's a nice size for when you're expecting to do, you know, just 3 card readings. That's a nice size to have show up on the table and to work with. So that, I think, sizing wise, I think that's really great. You do have to be careful that when there are decks that have, well, number one, if your decks have gilding, like this does, even though it's not shiny, you know, riffle shuffle at your own risk. I riffle shuffle everything. And if it wears well, I like the aged wearing that it can have on it, so I don't worry about it. But you should be aware that that could impact your edging. But you know, when you use regular cardstock, the smaller you get, the harder it is to then riffle shuffle because it just doesn't have the flexibility like a plain cardstock has. This is large enough where I can still riffle and slightly bridge it. Again, does anybody care about that besides me? No, or there are some people, but so that's nice. Like, it is Oracle cardstock, but at the same time, because it's slightly bigger, it's not to the degree where it's actually uncomfortable to be able to shuffle, especially as they get used. So quite like the feeling of it. They're not glossy. They're not like a what I would call like a super matte, but I wouldn't even call this satin, I don't think. Maybe slightly. It's a very nice sheen to it. It's close to being matte. I quite like the look of it. Doesn't get any glare off the table on it. And shuffles well, so no complaints on that for me. So there's that. Okay, so again, so a good chunk of the book, let me find it here. Not half, but I would say a good third of the deck, maybe, of the book, really goes into how to go about using his system of reading, as well as so how to go about using that system, really walks you through it, and then it does talk about how you can use this in larger readings, but it tends to be using sort of 2 cards, as you should really with cardamancy style decks. You can do a cardamancy style deck with any tarot reading. Just add some extra cards, like we have the present. This is like a relationship reading, but there are 3 cards for each of the positions, right? And that helps you to really be able to transfer a cardamancy style reading into the spreads that you know and love. Now, he also does have a Celtic cross spread, which is always makes me smile. Stephen's probably been around since I have, when the Celtic cross reigned supreme. I used it entirely. I thought that was the only way you did tarot readings for a long time. So I have done many a year of Celtic crosses. And so he does put that here so that you can tap into that. And even with single cards, which again, these are symbols. Like, there's no reason that you can't do a one-to-one, but if you want to take advantage of cardamancy, he talks about, you know, kind of doubling them up, which is great. So again, I'm not going to go like into full detail about his reading style, because obviously that's part of what you're purchasing in the book. But I do think that it's important to understand that he really has the reading space situated so that you're really thinking about where you are at. So if you're doing a 2-card reading, he talks about, you exist here, right? This blank space here on the table represents you. And then when you pull the 2 cards here now, we are pulling up these 2 cards, and they are in relation to us sitting right here. And he goes through each of the scenarios. If you pull 2 cards, you could have 2 pips. You could have a pip and a court card. You could have 2 court cards in which you are the first court card and somebody else or some energy in the situation is the other one. And he kind of goes through each of the scenarios that could happen. But you are in relation to these 2 pip cards, or you are in relation to, I'm going to just kind of fake it here for a second just so you can, of course, now while I find a court card when you want a court card. So then it would be you, right, in relation with this stranger and gaining support from this stranger. There might be outside energy that you don't know about or aren't aware of that is going to be able to offer support for you. And that is in relation, you here, a relation to this energy here, and this is tying the 2 of you together. And then if there are 2 court cards, then you're the first court card and the second court card is in relation to another person or to an energy in the situation. So it really is focusing on where are you in relation to the situation. And then of course he goes into 3 cards and the same thing, how you are, that you're still here. And it could be a bunch of pip cards here just telling you a bunch of stuff about yourself. You could be showing up in the main 3 cards as the first court. It could be 3 courts where there are you and other, multiple people or energies in the situation. Again, he goes through each one of the scenarios and how you read it. But the key here for me is that he's very interested in this system. He's very interested in understanding how, where you are positioned in the reading, and then being able to then see what's going on based on that. So if I laid, 3 cards out, at the beginning when we're starting, I'm always sort of over here. And with the case of there being 1 court card here, I'm reading myself and I have the satisfaction of planning that is tying me in conjunction with another person or somebody that I might get to get advice about this. If I want to have a satisfying planning session, maybe there's somebody in the situation I can get advice from, or go to the internet for some advice, depending on the situation at hand. But I'm being positioned in relation to these cards, and I really think that that is kind of, again, and he goes through all the variations, and I think that that's what really sets this apart. By itself, it's cool, right? We've got a clear Cardamancy style deck. We're paying attention to our PIP cards and what could be going on there. We have a whole set of personality types in the court cards, so the way that these can come up in interaction with each other. So that by itself is great and cool, and I love to see Cardamancy decks. But then to really do the work of really opening it up so that we can understand how we relate to the end. Where are we? So then how do we see these other cards relating to us? I think is fantastic. And I love that addition that's pulled into this lovely little deck. And I use little, not in a negative. So I hope that you've enjoyed this look at this. You can find this, this is again Red Feather, so you can find this in bookstores. You can find this on the Amazons, like any place that you buy mass market decks. You should be able to find this. And well done, Mr. Steven, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to take a look at and use this deck.